Hi there, my name is Diane, but you can just call me D. So today I thought I would do a mid-year checking, see how I'm going with my reading. If you haven't seen my previous video, I did the MidYear Book Freakout Tag. There I talk about my favorite books and my most disappointed books. I'll leave a link for you to check it out. Today it's more gonna be about looking at the stats, how many pages I've read, how many books, what genre, and all that stuff. So I am using the Google Sheet provided by G from Book Roast, and I will link it down below. The main stuff that I need is there, so if you're interested, I will have it down below. The number of books that I've actually read is 24 books so far, and I've DNF'd 2 books. I believe one was an old romance. It was published in the 90s, and you could really tell I just didn't enjoy the plot or the characters and the traits. I just didn't like it, so I DNF'd that one. And the second one I think was The Push. I actually had no real interest in reading, but I had an idea for a thriller video, and for that video I chose thrillers that I didn't really care about. In the end I just could not continue reading this book. It was not good, even though there's so much hype around this book. I think it's been done before. It's nothing new. I would not say it's a thriller in the sense that there's no like super huge twist or whatever. To me it's more like a suspense, and I really didn't like the main character. I didn't like how things were portrayed. Of the books that I've read, the highest average rating was for The House in the Cerulean Sea. On Goodreads it's 4.51, and that's not surprising. I give it 5 stars. It had a lot of hype and I think it was deserved. And the lowest average rating, it was for Snow by John Benville, and the average rating was 3.58. And to me, it's still too high for what this book is. It really doesn't deserve any more than a 1 star. I just didn't like it. I've talked a few times about this book. It's terrible. The longest book that I've read is The Poppy War by R.F. Kuang at 531 pages. I'm pretty proud of that. I think if I read Malice by John Gwynne this year, then it will beat this one. And my shortest book was A V by Kim Thuy at 144 pages. Let's go into the stats and then I'll show my star rating. For the books read per month, like I said, I've read 24 books, 26 in total, including the DNFs. April was my highest month, which is really funny because it's actually my finals month when I was in school. So it was my busiest time. My least amount of books read was in June. I only read 2 books, and one of them was a DNF, so that's interesting. But in June I just didn't really have any desire to read. I'm getting back into the swing of things, so that should be okay. And as you can see, my average is about 4 to 5 books a month. I would say it's usually 4 books is a good amount for me, and sometimes 5 books if I put an audiobook in there. Okay, so then for the pages read per month, and the total pages read this year is 9,257 pages. We're not too far from 10,000. If you divide it by 24 books, I think it was around like 356 pages. And then for my reading method, it's, as you can see, it's mainly physical books at 65%. And then it's audiobooks at about 20%. I've read only 3 ebooks so far and 1 mixed media, which is where I combined the audio experience to the reading experience, to the physical reading experience. That makes sense because I get my books from the library, so I apparently read across 10 different genres, and the main one being fantasy at about 31%, so 8 books, which makes sense. Surprisingly, the next highest genre is romance, and I think it could be because I've read some fantasy romance, and so I'm categorizing them as romance first, and then some contemporary. So that's interesting. I've only read 1 thriller this year, 1 mystery, 2 historical fiction, 2 science fiction, 1 literary fiction. I'm definitely more in the fantasy mood right now, but I did feel like the past couple of months it was more contemporary, which is usually not something I like, so that was interesting. The length of the books read, and as you can see, the highest is between 350 to 400, so it makes sense when I said that my average was about 356 pages per book. So I read 7 books that were between 350 and 400, and then I read 4 books that were between 450 and 500, so those are starting to become big books, you know? To me, what I'm seeing in this graph is that I tend to go to the larger side of the books, and that makes sense because if I read a lot of fantasies, then it makes sense that they are a bit bigger. That's usually the case. So for my star rating, interestingly enough, I give most often 3 stars with almost 35%. It makes sense because I often tend to give 3 stars to books I like, but I don't think they're anything special or that I could recommend to certain people, but also would not recommend to everyone. There were 6 books that I gave 4 stars to, so that's pretty cool, pretty impressive. I'm pretty happy with that because as you can see, there were only 3 books that I gave 5 stars to. Then if you combine the 1 and 2 stars, because usually 1 and 2 stars are just not good books in my opinion, it's 6 books together. So it's more than I would like to have going, but it's the risk that you take when you read hyped books or when you try to catch up on things that on like older series or older books. And so I think it would be interesting to just see what my star rating looks like in terms of books. That's on Goodreads. I think the discrepancy is just how I rounded up or down on Goodreads versus on my Google sheet. That's that. So for the publication year, most of my books are from 2020, so that's cool because I am trying to read books that are a little bit more recent, and I've got also 4 books that are from 2021, so that's great. And how I got it, mostly borrowed. Like I said, I use my library a lot, so that makes sense. For the age category, I read mostly adult, almost 60%, so 15 books adult and 11 books young adult. I haven't read any middle grades yet. Middle grade covers are just so beautiful, but I haven't had the opportunity to get any of those yet. The LGBTQ plus rep, so we had 10 books that had representation within the main character and 5 that the representation was just present in. So it's 15 books against 11 books that there's no representation. So I'm pretty happy with that. Yeah, I'm pretty happy with that. I have been trying to be a little bit more mindful this year of what I'm picking up. And then series versus standalones. I mean, it's almost 50-50, right? I read 14 books in a series and 12 as a standalone. That makes sense. If I read a lot of fantasies, it's usually part of a series, so it's cool. And I finished 1 series. That's nice. That's actually the Grisha trilogy. So anyway, I'm glad it's done. And then we have, in terms of authors, I've read 9 books by authors of color and 17 that were not. That's not as good as I want it to be, but it's getting there, you know. And then I've read about 65% women authors. I'm happy with that. I think this is good. It's usually what it ends up being at the end of the year. And then for the own voices, it's a little bit tricky obviously to know, but from what I was able to gather, I have read 61% books that were on voices, so that's great. Okay, I think that's it. I'm pretty happy where I'm at. I would like to read more books that I enjoy, and I would like to improve on certain goals that I had set myself. I still need to improve my NetGalley ratio. I have read a few books this year, but just not enough. So for my reading challenges, I wanted to read from my physical TBR shelves, and that has not happened, but I have read from my physical library TBR shelf, so I'll count it as going well. And then I had some books on my radar, and it's just a few. I haven't updated my goals. I've been in a bit of a slump, so it's been hard to keep track. But I had Black Sun, which I read. I had Ray Bearer, I haven't read that yet. I had Elatsoe, which I read, and The House in the Cerulean Sea, which I read. So I'm pretty happy so far with those books being on my radar, and I have read them, so that's nice. Anyway, that's it. That's all the stats that I have. I would be interested to know what was your highest rated book and your lowest rated book this year. I love stats, so if you love stats, make sure you give this video a thumbs up and subscribe if you want more videos like this. Thank you for watching. Bye!